The IPBS highlighted very well that the compounding effects of the main drivers of changes are likely to amplify the loss and the degradations of ecosystems and the biodiversity they host under business as usual scenarios. And these drivers of changes have been summarized into 5 main sources: the land sea use change, the overexploitations of natural resources, the pollutions, the invasive alien species, and climate change. And the monitoring of these drivers is really an essential component of the detections and the attributions of the biodiversity changes that you already heard a lot during yesterday, and you will hear again during the next days. And the climate change in particular is projected to become really an increasingly important drivers of changes in the conditions and the functionings of the ecosystems, and consequently in the services these ecosystems are providing to society. And if we look also at the GBF, it also stressed that nature can be conserved, restored, and use sustainability in a sustainability way if the drivers of change and their underlying clauses are properly addressed. So we decided to organize 2 sessions on the drivers of changes with a focus on the use of Earth observation. And this one will be a more general type of sessions addressing different aspects of the drivers. And then we, with Clément, by the way, I'm Marc Paganini from the European Space Agency, and Clément Albagel also from ESA. But Clément is in the climate office, and I'm in the application part of ESA. So, but we are both involved in biodiversity. So we'll have another sessions after this one on the climate as a drivers of changes. So in these sessions, we will show a number of examples, of best practice examples in the use of Earth observation for monitoring these drivers of changes. Unfortunately, we have 3 speakers missing, so I will have to make 2 presentations on their behalf, and the other one will be a video that we will play. So the first speaker is Maria Santos, and she will make a presentation on the causal inference with Earth observation data to attribute biodiversity changes. So we can show the first, yeah, let's do it.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Santos, and I'm here today to talk about exploratory analysis that we've been doing with a large group of people that have been funded by the University Research Priority Program in Global Change and Biodiversity from the University of Zurich in Switzerland. So I'm going to talk about how do we actually use Earth observation data, and how do we actually make sense of it using some statistical tools coming from causal inference to attribute biodiversity changes. I'm just here speaking on behalf of a large list of authors, and what I would like to start is something that is not surprising for any of you in this room, is that we're experiencing a large rate, an unprecedented rate of decline of biodiversity, despite its importance to maintaining ecosystem functioning and societal well-being. We see this in the recently approved goals and targets of the CBD, and we see that within these goals, we want to understand ecosystem integrity, biodiversity, but as we move from goal A towards goal B, C, and D, we see more influences of nature contributions to people, societal and stakeholder engagement, but also financial and socioeconomic mechanisms as important to think about conservation of biodiversity and its importance. So with that, we know, and these goals express very well, that there are feedbacks between biodiversity, nature contributions to people, and ecosystem services, and societal well-being that are sensitive to processes of global change, here including many of the drivers of biodiversity change that we already heard. So if we conceptualize these feedbacks as this interaction between these 4 domains that depict interactions between Earth and world processes in a way, we can start to think, how do we actually use Earth observation, and what kind of analytical framework could we use to integrate across these domains? So in the next few minutes, I'll give you an overview of what we've been trying to do to integrate across these domains and start to understand the processes and the feedbacks between them. So our understanding of these feedbacks, I would say, it's still limited, but there are some promising methodological advances that may allow us to start to understand them. The picture on your left shows an example of a causal inference within the climate science that links climate change variables to societal processes and other types of variables. And causal inference has been proposed to be able to understand feedbacks in what we call coupled human-nature systems or social ecological interactions. And we are still very in the incipience of applying such methods across these different domains. The beauty, let's say, of the causal inference or causal discovery to these coupled human-nature interactions is because it provides us a way to ground our thinking. It provides us a theoretical way to express potential causal relationships between different components of these systems. It may tell us how sensitive outcome variables might be to some parameters of a system or some drivers. It allows us to examine ex post alternative explanations for why we observe what we observe, or diagnose the severity of intervention in a given design, or generate indirect tests of causality that can then be tested in different types of ways. So if we bring this type of benefits of thinking in structural ways to social ecological systems, or understanding the links between these 4 domains, is because it allows us to try to unveil some of these feedbacks that are very important to understand how the direct or indirect drivers of biodiversity change might be operating, and therefore we are able to address the root causes of change and not just on the immediate effects. So there's a slight difference between causal inference and what we apply here, and I will show you, that is causal discovery. Ideally, we would want causal inference. We all know the benefits of causal inference. It allows us to identify causal effects given certain types of interventions, being it a conservation intervention, a policy, a financial intervention. But what if we don't know what causal structure we're actually looking for? And this is very common when we're thinking about coupled human and nature systems and these drivers of biodiversity loss, especially the more indirect drivers, is that we might not know what causal structure we're looking into. With the advent of large data sets and large capabilities to actually compute interactions between them, these new technologies and methodologies of causal discovery allows us to start unveiling potential causal links between these different domains. So they make use of these large data sets to kind of constrain the information space in which causal links might appear, and they provide us with a probability that a causal link might appear. So this is not working. Okay. There are several causal analysis methodologies that have been proposed with different goals, and for the purpose of this talk, I will be focusing on Granger causality. So as I mentioned, this idea of the causality, especially causal discovery, is to predict future values within a time series using prior values of another time series. So if we think about bringing in a lot of the different Earth observation data sets that we might have available to us, we might be able to constrain these interactions and therefore predict what are potential causal links that might emerge within these 4 domains that depict coupled human and nature systems. So this is where I'm going to show you in the next few minutes. I would like to zoom in into the island of Borneo, where we've been testing this approach. This is one of the world biodiversity hotspots, but also with large interactions with social and political decisions about, for example, palm oil plantations and other types of land uses that might drive large biodiversity changes. So what we did in our exploration or discovery of potential causal links within the island of Borneo was first ground our knowledge, what we actually know about the island of Borneo when it consists of the interactions between biodiversity and ecosystem function, global change, socioeconomic landscape, and ecosystem services as depicted in this framework that is on the bottom left side of your slide. So we conducted a systematic literature review. We retrieved about 1,700 papers where we looked into the time evolution of our knowledge about the different domains. Not surprisingly, a large majority of the papers were about biodiversity and ecosystem function within the island of Borneo, but some also, they extrapolated beyond the island of Borneo. And then you see here for the different domains that we're trying to understand the feedbacks, what kind of literature we actually are able to retrieve. More in summary, we see also on the top figure that only 87 of the 7,473 studies that we reviewed actually examined relationships across the 4 domains. And the most common words that we would observe in these types of literature were about species, the forest, the difference between the forest, and also policy and population densities. And if we see the temporal domain of our knowledge about the island of Borneo, for the individual domains, you see them in the bottom part of the bar graph. We see a lot of emphasis of understanding biodiversity and ecosystem function, but also on the socioeconomic impacts of the island. And then across domains, most of the studies reflect interactions between 2 of these domains. So we have some grounds to understand that there are possible causal links that might be discovered using this causal inference framework. So that's what we tested next. We retrieved several Earth observation data that was completed over the island of Borneo, and we used this causal discovery statistical framework to try to unveil links. To do that, we first retrieved global data sets that depicted the 4 domains. Not surprisingly, we were able to retrieve about 162 data sets for depicting biodiversity and ecosystem function. But when we go to socioeconomic landscape, we were only able to retrieve 8 data sets with global coverage. And you have different data sets depending on which fraction of this framework we're actually trying to analyze. And then we standardized and extracted data to the island of Borneo, and we're analyzing ultimately about 3,000 pixels of data across all of these 227 variables that we have to predict causal or discover causal relationships for this island. And then we did an experimental setup. So instead of going for a fishing expedition of what kind of causal links we might find, we decided to start with 3 potential causal loops across these 4 domains. And so the team came up with some ideas. For example, this causal loop here reflects that there's some feedbacks between human development, human footprint, tree density, and cropland, and we would like to try to unveil those by adding more variables. And that's the experiment that we conducted. We added variables, first in a balanced addition, 1 variable at a time, to see if the causal strength and the directionality of the causality would stay the same. And then we did it in an unbalanced way that depicted the proportion of variables that we were able to retrieve for each one of the domains, and see if that also affected what kind of causal links we would be able to unveil with this. And we did this 10,000 times, and these are the results. So what you will see now is the example for the 3 causal domains cores that I was mentioning. So this one is between, and these 4 parameters first. And in blue, you see negative effects. In orange, you see positive effects. The full line is fully supported causal discovery or causal relationship between these two domains. The dashed lines are partially supported, and then the bars tell you, as we add more variables through this, how stable are the directionality or the magnitude of the causal link between these domains. And then we examined, so these bar plots here, they basically just depict what the bars in the graph show of how often the directionality or the magnitude of the causal link actually changes as we add more variables into the causal relationship. So we see this for this core. We have also another core that brings in investment benefit factor, phosphorus loading, species richness, and food area. And we see, for example, in this case, fully supported positive effect, very robust bit of the effect of food area on phosphorus loading, and strongly supported negative effects of phosphorus loading and food area on species richness. And then the third causal core that we examined related population density, forest loss, soil water capacity, and alpha diversity. And here we find very fully supported negative effects of the domains where the blue arrows connect across them. So, and then we compare this with the literature review to see if the literature had already highlighted or not potential of these causal links. And we looked into the frequency at which these words co-occurred within the literature for each one of the links that we see between the four domains. And so this, what you see here are the correlations between these different variables. Sorry, I don't know what happened here with the slide. But then we also wanted to understand how this causal discovery algorithm behaved in terms of identifying certain strengths more than others of the causal link. This is somewhat problematic because causal links with a strength less than 0.25 are difficult to detect. The algorithm was stable to the shape of the distribution of the variables that we inputted. It was also very good. Even with small sample sizes, it was able to retrieve causal links, but it was very sensitive to the scaling of variables. In some cases, when we inputted scaled variables, the algorithm did not converge into a causal relationship. So in the last few minutes, I've showed you what we've been exploring in terms of unveiling potential causal links between direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity change, and what can we do with the diversity of Earth observation data sets. We zoomed in into the island of Borneo, but we can probably do this at the global level or for different spatial locations with the data that we have today and with the data that we have upcoming. With that, I would like to strengthen that this method is stable to the strength of the causal link, but be wary of low strengths. They might not be depicted. And also that new hypotheses were unveiled, especially when we compare the causal discovery results with what the literature actually showed us. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria. We have time for one or two questions. Do we have a question in the room? Yes, please. Introduce yourself and ask the question.
Thank you very much. I'm Maurizio Ferrari with the Forest Peoples Program. In the identification of the variables, especially the socioeconomic ones, have you calculated in their land tenure in terms of, to what extent there is a security of land tenure over certain areas? In our work, we have identified, for example, the concession system, of logging, plantations, and all that, as a major cause of land use change, which impacts biodiversity and communities depending on biodiversity quite a lot. So I was wondering how that would come into the picture. Thanks.
So at the moment we use just gridded outputs of models of, for example, investment benefit, but the model is very flexible to other types of data. So land tenure, even if it's in a polygon or a point, could be inputted into the model and to look into the causal relationships that we might be able to discover on that.
We have another question.
Etienne Laliberté, Université de Montréal. So how do you handle causes that cannot be remotely sensed but might be important? For example, the demand for the price for palm oil, or macroeconomics that can really drive land use change, but that cannot be remotely sensed. So is that something that
That's an excellent question. We usually call them externalities, and we don't include them in our model, but I think that if we are able to, at least globally, have some representation of some pressures of markets that are spatially explicit, we might be able to do that. The other beauty, I only showed you a spatial application of this type of analysis, but we can do it on time series, and there we might be able to look into market values and how the time series might predict the depictions in a non-spatial way.
We will take a third quick question, and then we'll move on to the next presentation.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a question about robustness testing, but we'll keep it maybe for later. In terms of how do you test the robustness, where you do placebo tests or that kind of analysis. But I'm also interested so it's very interesting to discover the links, and I was wondering what are your thoughts on what does that tell you about the mechanisms? If that also allows you to say something about the mechanisms of the effects that you're seeing.
So you might be able to think about, okay, so if there is a likelihood of a causal link that is unveiled given the variable structure that you have into that, you might be able to go into the literature like we did to see if that causal link was already depicted for the system that you're looking, or it generates a new hypothesis that you need to be able to test. So it allows you to kind of design a causal diagram of what might be happening between these four domains for further testing with either new data or new knowledge that you might have about your system.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. It's time to move on. Our next presentation will look at terrestrial changes in terrestrial ecosystem thanks to the use of satellite Earth observation. The lead author is Roshanak Darvisvade from the University of Twente in the Netherlands, but the lead author is not there, and it will be presented by Mark Paganini from ESA. Mark, the floor is yours for 15 minutes.
I'm just looking if the slides, so that's the second presentation, yeah. No, it's not that one.
The video you put is for the third presentation.
That's the third one, yes. Okay, it's that one. So thank you. So I will present I will make these presentations on behalf of the project team, as Clément said. So this is a project that was funded by ESA on terrestrial ecosystems. The project is called Biodiversity. It started already almost 2 years ago. So we do have some results to present. And the main objective was to assess how Earth observations can help addressing the knowledge gaps in terrestrial ecosystems with a number of pilot studies. And the reason why we wanted to present this in these sessions is because 2 of the studies are directly related to the drivers of changes. One is on the health of forest ecosystems, which is linked to, you will see, to invasive species and climate change. And the second pylon was on the monitoring of invasive alien species. So I'm doing this presentation on behalf of the project team, as I said. So you see here the whole list. And of course, I would like to acknowledge all these persons who contributed to the work. So the first study, as I said, concerns the health of forest ecosystems and their vulnerability to the drivers of changes. And we all know that the importance of forest degradation has called for prioritizations of forest restorations and conservation programs. And we see this both in the GBF as well as in the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, as well as in the Nature Restoration Law. So the main objective of this pilot was to improve the estimation of the productivity of forest ecosystems through a better integration of Earth observation in a process-based model, which is called the LPG gas. I will say it many times during my presentation, which is a model from the University of Lund that simulates the biogeochemical fluxes and the changes in ecosystem functioning in response to the main drivers of changes. So the study estimated the change of forest productivity in time and space, and at two levels. They worked in two temperate forests in Sweden and in Bavaria, which were used as sort of pilot sites, and then this was scaled up at a coarser resolutions at European scale. So in particular, the project, as I said, analyzed some drivers of changes. One is the impact of the bark beetle infestation, and the other one is the impact of climate change through the increasing land surface temperatures and the impact on the dynamic of forest productivity. So for this time series of net primary productivity for NPP were produced using the LP gas model with and without the assimilations of Earth observation data. And then these NPP time series were used to assess how the forest disturbance from the bark beetle infestations and drought affect the forest productivity. I hope that I'm clear with the description. So you see on this slide the two pilot studies that have been chosen for the local studies. So we have the Bavarian Forest National Park in Germany and the Ruperud Forest in Sweden. And this slide shows the workflow for the estimations of the NPP by assimilations of Earth observation data. And actually, the Earth observation data that we assimilate into the model is actually the Lift Area Index, so the LAI. So on the left side, you see the workflow on how we integrated LAI within the LP gas model to produce NPP at a higher resolution than what is currently done. Actually, we were working at 10-meter spatial resolutions. On the right, you see how the LAI product has been generated from the Sentinel-2 data. Alors, the validation of the LAI was at a local scale, essentially on the Bavarian Forest National Park. So you see on this slide LAI maps that were generating in two ways. One with an empirical LAI model based on the AV index. And we compare this also to one product that is available from Copernicus, which is this Copernicus High Resolution Vegetation Phenology and Productivity, which includes a number of variables that has LAI amongst them. In addition, we also use a time series of LAI from estimations of, from flux towers from European stations that were obtained to validate, not the LAI actually, the NPP and the GPP products that were derived from the LP gas models. Constraints and not constraints with the LAI data, as I was explaining before. So on this slide, you see we show you three comparisons of NPP products. On the left, this is what we call the satellite-adjusted NPP, so with the assimilations of LAI in the LP gas model. in the middle is the NPP from the model without the assimilations of LAI, and on the right you see the NPP from MODIS. What we can say is that when we assimilate the LAI into the model to have these satellite-adjusted NPP, we have an improved spatial resolutions, as you would understand, that we get from the LAI. So this enhances in a way the spatial details of NPP compared to the MODIS product or to the LP gas models when we don't use subservation data. And as a demonstration of impact, the project used these results to evaluate the change in net primary productivity in areas that have been impacted by the bark beetle outbreaks. And they also evaluate the temporal trends in the land surface temperature and assess the relationship with the fluctuations in MPP that are following the bark beetle infestation. So you have two aspects. One aspect is the NPP and from the bark beetle infestations, and the other aspect is the changes in land surface temperature. So this graph explains a bit better the methodology. So you have on the left the NPP products from the LPG gas with the assimilations of LAI in it. You have the land surface temperature data in the middle, and the reference data that they collected on bark beetle infestations from aerial photography. And these maps were then used to assess the dynamics of NPP over the years 2016 to 2020. These graphs, let me explain them briefly. They show the temporal variations over the 5 years of both NPP and the land surface temperature, starting from some bark beetle infestations in some forest strands that we compare, which are indicated in red, which we compare to the healthy forest stands that you see in gray. So typically the NPP is obviously decreasing when there is an infestation. And the dashed line represent the start of the infestation for each year. For example, if we take the very first graph on the left side, you see that the infestation started in 2016, and the location of the infested stands have been used in the following years to explore how the NPP is changing over time from the time of the infestations. So the same of the LST, and of course, on the LST is the opposite. So you get higher LST when there is an infestation compared to when there is no infestation. Alors, this map shows the NPP change in percentage. And to generate these maps, so they use the NPP data from the year 2016 as a reference, and then for the following years, they subtracted the NPP to determine whether the NPP value is increasing or decreasing on a pixel basis. And as you can see from these maps, the biggest drops is in 2018, where actually the regions experience some extreme drought. So you have a sort of combined effects as well of the drought with a decreasing of NPP as well, so which makes actually the situations even more complex. So the key results of this study was the following. So the disturbance factors like extreme drought events and bark beetle infestation significantly decrease the NPP and the forest productivity, which can be used as sort of indicators of forest health. And the integrations of LAI products within the LP gas model improve the estimation of FPP, particularly to have the spatial details that which we cannot get with a coarse resolutions approach. The second pilot that we did is the monitoring of invasive alien species. And to do this, we leverage the advances in deep learning architecture. So we've been using AI methods here that we applied to the species distribution models and helped to understand what are the drivers of IAS, so invasive alien species invasions. So you know that invasive alien species is one, as I said, one of the main drivers of changes, but it's also one of the primary causes of extinctions in many taxonomic groups. And the challenges are multiple. It's about improving the knowledge of the species presence, the pathway for the introductions, the impacts on the native species, and of course the management options you have in order to deal with these invasive alien species. And the species distribution models have been extensively used, but are currently not really leveraging the latest advances in Earth observations, as well as in the digital technologies like the use of deep learning methods. So here we believe that the Copernicus program and the Sentinel missions make available a lot of data sets that have the potential really to be used as direct or indirect predictors in the SDM models. But we also believe that the potential of such methods in the context of the invasive alien species still remain underexploited. So the project follows a two-stage approach. The first focus on a large number of invasive species in Europe at a rather small scale, at 1 kilometer spatial resolution, and then they model a subset of the species in Belgium and 10-meter spatial resolutions. So in the first phase, the project modeled a broad sense of invasive species, including 99 animals, 5 fungi, and more than 200 plants. As I said, at 1 kilometer spatial resolution. And you can see an example of the model prediction for the Vespa velutina, a species which is the Asian hornet. So on the left, you have the occurrence with the GBIF database, which was used actually for training the model. And the project has benchmarked different type of modeling approach, including deep learning techniques, as I said, and the XGBoost was found, well, I don't know if you know this, but it's one of the different deep learning models, was used to be the best performing algorithm. So the project has also benchmarked different use, because you can benchmark the models, but also the predictors that you use in your models. And this benchmark on the predictors have shown that the use of environmental predictors in conjunction with remote sensing data was performing better for most of the taxonomic groups. I'm almost done with the presentations. So in the second phase, the project's model a restricted set of invasive alien species, but at a higher spatial resolution, so at 10 meters. And this included 8 plants and 4 animal species, which were selected based also on the availability of in situ data that were available in Belgium and on their impact also in the country. And I must say that Belgium was chosen as a study area because of the large sampling density they have of observation from recent data collections. So in this slide, you can see the predicted distributions of one of the species, which is this Asian lady beetle. You see also the GBIF occurrence and also the future importance map of the model, because with deep learning, well, with most of the machine learning type of models, we can also see which feature has the most discriminating power in order to detect the presence. So the major lesson learned of the projects are that the importance of remote sensing features in IAS modeling depends on the spatial scale, and it's very important, of course, if we go to the scale that we did in Belgium. And EO-based features explain the local patterns of IAS, where we can say that the environmental features fail to do so because, of course, of the resolutions of these data sets. So modeling the invasive alien species at high spatial resolutions has multiple benefits. It can help to assess the landscape fragmentations, to identify the risk areas and to analyze also the migrations of certain species. So the team is currently working on a publication that will soon be available. I must say, it's an initial work. Still, a lot of work has to be done on this. So we are also lacking good validation data to assess, because we have presence, but we don't have absence, which is always a big issue when you do such modeling. But I must say that big progress has been done with these projects. And with this, I thank you for your attention. And I'll be happy to take questions, even if I'm not part of the project team, but I can probably be able to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. In the interest of time, I will take only one quick burning question, if any.
Thank you. This comparison of the LPJ with the remote sensing derived NPP and was very, very interesting. And I'm wondering, I don't know how closely you were involved in the project. What was driving the main differences? Yeah, and when I look at some of the NPP maps, there was a substantial difference with one of the other products that you were showing, and I'm wondering why such a substantial difference. Yeah.
I think there were two reasons actually to assimilate the LAI in the model. One of the reasons is to improve the spatial details of the NPP that were only available at a rather coarse resolutions without that assimilations. Same with the MODIS data, which is available at a very coarse resolution. But one of the other reasons to do this is that by using LAI, but we could have used another parameters, we are also able to capture dynamic changes like the bark beetle infestations, which the model doesn't have. So MODIS can do it as well, but of course not with the same resolutions. So one of the main reasons to do these simulations is to capture changes that a model will not do it, or at least that the model doesn't have the input data that allows the model to capture this. So with the LAI that we use, of course, when there was a bark beetle infestation, the LAI dropped, and this was possible to take this into account when modeling the NPP. So I hope that I was clear with the answer.
Thank you. So our next speaker could not be here. He prepared a video. It's Aman Gupta from the University of Zurich. And the video will be about, the work is about the effect of land cover transition dynamics on patterns of forest fragmentation. We will listen for this video for about 10 minutes. And Aman has designated Maria to answer any question. So any question, you can ask Maria.
Hi, welcome to my talk on the coevolutionary dynamic of dominant land cover transitions in forested landscapes. Human interaction and transformation of forest areas leads to forest fragmentation. Previous research suggests that forest fragmentation leads to reduced carbon storage in above ground canopies, increased vulnerability to forest fires, reduced soil nitrogen concentrations, and also causes the progressive homogenization of biological communities within a forest ecosystem. But forest fragmentation is a landscape-level phenomena, and its effects on biodiversity and ecosystem services are also mediated by the quality, amount, and the distribution of the land cover matrix surrounding forest patches. This happens through mechanisms such as habitat diversification and complementation, wherein a forest matrix can provide hard or soft boundaries for the movement and dispersal of species across the landscape. Additionally, the relative distributions of forest and non-forest land covers in a landscape can also affect hydrological flows, land surface temperature, and the proliferation of agricultural pests. At the same time, research also suggests that certain dominant modes of human-forest interaction, such as agricultural expansion, industrial logging, urbanization, and human-enabled reforestation efforts, which are all instances of land cover change, can lead to varying patterns of forest fragmentation. In fact, previous literature suggests that these typical modes of human-forest interactions might manifest in terms of characteristic patterns in both time and space. The graphic to your right depicts patterns of deforestation as uncovered by researchers of instances of deforestation as happening in tropical areas. And this is precisely the hypothesis that I would like to explore through my research work, which is the extent to which modes of human-forest interactions can give rise to specific spatial and temporal patterns of forest fragmentation. To operationalize this idea, I decompose forest fragmentation into aspects of forest composition and configuration, and I decompose modes of human-forest interaction by considering the dominant land cover, which is changing in forested landscapes, its starting amount, and whether that has an effect on these patterns of fragmentation. The effect of the spatial configuration of these different land covers on these patterns of fragmentation, and the effect of the rate of change of these different land covers within forested landscapes and their effects on forest fragmentation. For the purposes of this presentation, I will focus and only talk about the results that explored how these varying land covers and their starting amounts and their rate of change in forested landscapes affects patterns of forest composition. Now I want to briefly walk you through the data set that I have used and the method that I have devised in order to answer this research question. The data set comes from the Copernicus Climate Change Initiative of the European Space Agency. This is a global land cover data set with an annual coverage from 1992 to 2020 at a 300 meter pixel resolution. The method thereafter entails essentially breaking up the global land surface into 4 regular size grids. The spatial resolution for these grids ranges from 0.05 to 0.5 degree decimal, which roughly corresponds to 5.4 to 54 kilometers at the equator. Now, one of the important aspects of this method is to identify the dominant transition that has occurred within each grid cell. In order to identify the dominant transition, we first calculate the net land cover change that has occurred between 1992 and 2020. And thereafter, we tabulate all pixel transitions that have occurred within our specified grid cell. And the dominant transition is thereafter identified as the most frequently occurring transition between 1992 and 2020. As you can see in the image provided alongside, the 2 arrows are pointing towards a transition which has occurred from a forest to a built-up class, and therefore the dominant transition is identified as forest to built-up. Since forest is our focal class, all other land covers in conjugation with the forest class are referred to as the conjugate class. Now, having identified our dominant transition for each grid cell, we go about tracking its composition and configurational metrics for each of those classes, for each grid cell, for each year between 1992 and 2020. Here, composition simply entails calculating the proportion of class pixels in the grid landscape, while configuration is a measure of its adjacency, which is a landscape metric which indicates the level of aggregation or isolation of a particular class in the landscape. Here I have indicated 2 landscapes with very similar amounts of forest pixels or within the landscape, but with vastly different configurations or distributions within the landscape. Having acquired a time series of these metrics, what I thereafter do is model these time series using both logistic and quadratic curves. And I select the curve that provides me the best fit. And finally, having acquired the best fitted curve, I calculate the transition time for the landscape metric, which is essentially a proxy for rate of change and represents the shortest interval of time taken for 80% of the net change in the value of the metric. Now here I present the first set of results, which explores the effect of the starting amount of the land cover on mean forest loss. This set of results has been produced by modeling these trends using a generalized additive model. Here you can see how cropland and built-up consistently affect a greater mean forest loss than the other natural land covers at almost all values of starting amount. This is also reflected in the first column of the table provided on the right, which shows the maximum forest loss affected by the various transition land covers. Additionally, we also observe that for both cropland and built-up, the maximum forest loss is achieved at relatively low starting amounts as compared to the other land covers. My second set of results show the relationship between the transition time for different land covers and the corresponding mean forest loss affected in these landscapes. The plot on the left shows the cumulative sum of forest loss affected by each land cover type for each successive interval of transition time. Here we see that built-up expansion in forested landscapes tends to occur at a much slower rate than for other land covers. This is indicated by the black vertical line on the plot, which indicates that while for other land covers, roughly 85% of total forest loss happens in intervals of less than 10 years, built-up expansion occurs more slowly, with less than 1/4 of its total forest loss happening in less than 10-year time intervals. The plot on the right shows the mean forest loss given different intervals of transition times for the different land covers. These trends again have been modeled using a generalized additive model. Here again we see that cropland and built-up stand out in their trends as compared to the other land covers, for whom the rate of expansion tends to have an almost negligible effect on mean forest loss. In what is a peculiar result, it can be seen that when cropland expansion occurs over a 9-year interval, then maximum forest loss tends to occur. Now to kind of circle back and summarize the two sets of results in the context of the larger scope of this research project. So the questions I posed at the beginning were, to what extent is forest composition affected by the rate of change of the transition land cover type? Here we find that cropland and built-up land covers are most sensitive to their starting amount in forested landscapes and affect maximum mean forest loss at relatively small starting amounts compared to other land covers. The second question was, to what extent is forest loss affected by the rate of change of the transition land cover? Here we see that the rate of change of land covers has varying effects on mean forest loss. Built-up expansion occurs very slowly as compared to other land covers, while cropland affects a maximum forest loss when expansion occurs over a 9-year time interval. Taken together, I think it is safe to conclude that modes of human-forest interactions typified by the cropland and the built-up land covers give rise to characteristic spatial and temporal patterns that are markedly different from other natural land cover types. And with that, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you for your attention.
Do we have a question that Maria may or may not be able to answer on this work? I don't see any. Maybe I will just bring a small clarification regarding this land cover product. It's a time series that spans from 1992 to present day. Up to 2015, it has been developed in a research and development context under ESA's Climate Change Initiative program, and then it has been passed to an operational service from Copernicus. but for sake of homogeneity, the change are not detected at 300 meter spatial resolution, but at 1 kilometer spatial resolution. So maybe that can also explain some of the results Aman has on the forest fragmentation. The actual changes are not at 300 meter spatial resolution, but at 1 kilometer scale. So if we do not have any question, we will introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is from the Technical University of Dresden. It's Anna Kort to talk about monitoring agricultural land use and farmland biodiversity with Earth observation. Anna, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to present some of the work of my group here. So as Mark already said in the introduction, land use is a major driver of biodiversity loss, and I'm going to focus on agriculture. So how bad is it actually? And I want to share with you two figures. The first one looks into the big killers, so with a focus on the IUCN threatened species. And as you can see on the slide, biodiversity or agricultural activity ranks second, directly threatening more than 5,000 species here, directly after overexploitation. And the second figure I would like to show with you, which focuses on birds. It comes from the European Common Bird Monitoring Scheme. And what you see on this figure are trends in the birds, how well they're doing. And what you see is the red curve. This is farmland birds, and we see a huge decline in farmland birds compared to the whole group of birds, which is the blue line. And you can actually see that at least in Europe, it seems that the forest birds are actually doing a little bit better recently. So huge declines according to following agriculture. And finally, I would like to share with you one more quote, which is from '92 already, from Sue McIntyre, where they stated the struggle to maintain biodiversity is going to be won or lost in agricultural systems. This may be true or may not be true, but I think it's at least worth for us to discuss in the context of this conference here. So when we talk about agriculture as a driver of biodiversity loss, always there's a lot of dimensions to take into account. So we have changes in land cover from forest to cropland, but also if we stay in the agriculture and the farmland domain, changes from grassland to cropland. That's what happens a lot and what we can see with Earth observation. But also we have changes in land management and in particular in land use intensity. So agroecosystems, they are very complex systems, and management intensity plays a major role here. So we have to talk about fertilizer, pesticides, things like mowing regimes, which are being detected using Earth observation, crop rotations, etc. And finally, changes in landscape structure. It's not only fields, but they are embedded in a landscape. And we see huge changes here in field sizes, in crop diversity, and in a loss of connecting landscape elements. As an important note, there are regions in the world, and Europe is a prime example of that, where we have a long tradition of farming. And actually only this farming activity has created or has led to partly the rich biodiversity we're finding there. So I think it's important to also keep in mind that what we are now trying to conserve is actually the result of the human activities. Field size, I mentioned this, and I would like to show you one example from the region where I'm from, Saxony in Germany, where we used the CIA Corona spy program. That was a surveillance program targeted at the Soviet Union and China and a few other countries. Saxony is in the former GDR, so luckily our region was covered by this program. And a colleague of mine and his group, Matthias, they did a huge effort. Can I go back as well? Yes. They did a huge effort in georeferencing this data set. It was really, really messy, but it's a very interesting data source. And we then had a lot of students who helped to digitalize what you see here now on these maps, individual fields, a huge work. And I think it's very obvious on this slide that we see this decrease in field sizes, this increase in field sizes, lots of small fields that we have in this picture from the 65 compared to the situation how we see the landscape now in 2018. So this presentation is going to be a summary of different projects we're having in my group with very different focus, but all of them somehow related to the topic of agriculture. Also keep in mind, I said that already, my focus or my research focus is European agriculture and biodiversity, so it's not, what I'm saying is not necessarily true for all regions of the world. There are 3 points I want to make in this presentation. The first one is the question, are we lacking biodiversity data from agroecosystems? The second one, if so, why? What are main challenges for monitoring farmland biodiversity? And the last one I want to share with you, according to the title of this conference, is Monitoring for Action, 2 examples how we can use novel technologies to monitor biodiversity for result-based payments in agriculture. So, first question, how well are agroecosystems represented? There are a lot of Earth observation products to look into cropland extent. I just picked our World in Data figure here. What we see here is that 50% of the habitable land area is used for agriculture. What I did is I searched the book of abstract for this conference. You see the search strings I was using here. And according to my results, 4.2%, that's 14 of the 331 presentations and posters here on the conference, they deal with biodiversity in farmland or in agricultural landscapes. So if you assume that this conference is a good representation of the biodiversity monitoring community, I would argue, wow, that's not so much, 4% of the people here presenting on it. More seriously, we see similar biases in the GBIF data. That's something we're currently looking into in my group as well. So why is it that so few people study agroecosystems? Maybe it's because they look really boring. They are not so boring if you look into the details. Or maybe it's just very hard to do some research in agroecosystems, which is true. So thinking about doing field work for biodiversity monitoring in an agricultural landscape, it's not so easy. So entry to the areas is an issue. The farmers don't like you to be on their fields, especially if you say, like, I want to go 3 or 4 times during the season. That makes them not very happy, so you really need to establish a good relationship with them. Also, when we not only think about the monitoring, but we also want to understand like the drivers or the management that impacts the biodiversity. It looks like a very simple ecosystem. You look at this field, one species, homogeneous structure, and so on. But the management varies a lot, so we cannot even assume that the same management happens throughout an entire field. It differs. And so this has also really implications for planning field work. So I can tell you planning a landscape level, a very nice spatially stratified biodiversity monitoring in an agricultural landscape is a nightmare because you never know what the farmers are going to do on their fields in the next year. So it requires a lot of information. And yeah, this access to management data is really an issue. And I would like to use the opportunity to remind you of this paper that we did as part of the GA1 Ecosystem Services Working Group. That's work led by Patty, where when we talk about ecosystem services, and I think when we talk about agroecosystems, we somehow have to keep that in mind because that's one of the main purposes of this ecosystem. Anthropogenic contribution is the thing that we need information on. So this data on the management is really crucial. The good news is such data actually exists, at least in Europe. It's this acronym that you see here, the YACS-ELPIS data. It's a very, very rich data source. It's very hard to get. So we had this European project funded by the European Commission with case studies in several European countries. It took us 2 years to get access to these data, which were like really crucial for the project. The data set is nice because it has field level information on crop types, on agro-environmental schemes that are applied, and even on the areas in between, if the farmers get money for them, like field edges, tree rows, hedges, and so on. So it's a very rich data set. And we used it to model the effects of agro-environmental schemes on farmland birds. So we used bird monitoring data from different sources, including the Natura 2000 monitoring and specific dedicated projects in the region. And we combined them at multiple scales with other information, of course, in an ensemble species distribution modeling framework. So looking into the effects, I don't expect you to understand this figure right now, which combines our results for a case study region in Saxony again for different species, for different agro-environmental schemes, and also at different spatial scales. What we see, and I think this is the main problem also with when we compare the biodiversity crisis to the climate crisis, answers are really not easy, because all the species, they like different things. So we found the same here. The same agro-environmental scheme has very different effects on different species. Especially for cover crops and organic farming, we had very contrasting results in our case study. But we also found that it's really, and this is the classical landscape ecology question, at what scale do we have to look at these ecological effects? We found that the effect at the landscape scale really was the strongest. And I want to come to an end with two examples where we use biodiversity monitoring data for action. The idea, or actually agriculture is a nice field if you want to have an impact, because there's a lot of money in there. So the European Union spends 1/3 of their expenditures goes in the common agricultural policy. And so there is actually the opportunity to leverage some changes. And we are currently very much interested in the concept of result-based payments for farmers. In brief, it means that the farmers are not paid for doing a specific management of their land, but they are paid for the biodiversity results. So, for example, the presence of a selection of indicator species. And for this, we need really good and reliable monitoring data. So two examples. One is we are using ecoacoustic data. That's an upcoming monitoring technique also on this conference. I think there's also a workshop in the afternoon on that topic, where the idea is to record soundscapes. We use these audio morph data, which are small and nice and cheap. They don't have the highest quality, but they give us the opportunity to really monitor across landscapes, what I'm really interested in. And there are tools, AI tools, BirdNet, I'm sure you have heard of it, at least for the European farmland birds, it works quite nicely. You still need, in my opinion, at least ornithologists to check that, to check the results for your case study region, and also to adapt for species-specific confidential scores. We use this data and we sample across agricultural landscapes to produce species richness maps, for example. Now this is not working anymore. So we're interested in, if we want to do design result-based payments, we first need to know where the species are in the landscape to then adapt the payment levels for the farmers. 4%, but maybe somebody's in the room who's working on agro-environmental schemes as well. I want to advertise a bit of a special issue that I'm co-editing in biological conservation, where we're looking for contributions of technological developments in biodiversity monitoring and how we can actually improve them by designing these new agro-environmental schemes. Last example, and I can keep this short because there's a poster associated to this session, where we also, under the umbrella of result-based payments, look into the potential of UAV data to basically detect wild arable plants. So it's again another study in Saxony for 40. We have a list of 40 red list species there, and we try to detect them within fields. With the vision of designing schemes in the future where farmers are actually paid for this, what they call weeds and what we call like endangered species. So if you're interested, come and see the poster in the afternoon. So to summarize, I think agroecosystems, they deserve a bit more attention from the biodiversity monitoring community. They are maybe not the most interesting or rewarding systems to study. That's what we see with a lot of ecologists. Not so many iconic species there. But I think they offer really a huge potential if we want to transfer our monitoring results into action. And yeah, with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and of course, my whole team. If you're interested, you can check out our website. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Anna. Do we have a question? So there is maybe only 4% among the room that is interested in.
It's not a good opener, no, for the presentation.
I think I would ask a question. Did you look at the eco schemes of the new common agricultural policy of Europe? Because I guess that it's very beneficial also for biodiversity. Could you summarize a bit, briefly, what would be the impact on biodiversity from these eco schemes?
Yeah, so the projects we're having are mostly focusing on the agri-environmental schemes, because the eco schemes, they just started. I mean, they are not so different in terms of the impact. Overall, I would say none of the eco schemes is really targeting biodiversity that well. Right, it's the other services that we're interested in. It's like carbon and water and stuff. But for biodiversity, there is very few schemes. So Saxony now tries to promote, or there's now a scheme to split fields, which is great. But I don't think farmers are going to participate, because we have like 100-hectare fields, and the scheme targets at 4 hectare. So the gap is too huge, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Thank you. I see 2 questions over there. We will take them both.
Hi, thank you. I wondered about this data set that you said called the IACS LPIS data for land management, and I wondered what can GeoBon do about that data access to encourage more research?
You mean the data that is very hard to get?
Yeah, like, why is it not shared openly, and is there any way that it could be negotiated, do you think?
The thing is, when you have the data, and then you will be able to know how much money is paid for which field. And then people always find ways to relate the location of fields to certain farms, and then you can, all of a sudden, know where the subsidies go. This is the thing. So we got data in 4 different countries. It's very different. Czech Republic, for example, is very open. Germany is very, very close. It's very hard to get the data. We had to find a pipeline into the ministry, and the data have to be stored on certain drives, encrypted. You can never ever have such a data set on your personal laptop. You're like screwed if it gets somewhere. It's like really hard. But if we had the data, also, all the people in remote sensing who tried to do crop maps, we don't need them in Europe, because we have this information. It's coming in August for the current year. It's actually there, but I don't know. If GeoBon wants to join this effort, I'm happy. But it's a hard way.
Thank you. So we've been told that we have to move on. So I encourage you to ask the question, discuss the question offline, and time to dive into next presentation. This time on freshwater ecosystem. The lead author is Petra Philipsson from Brockman Geomatic in Sweden. But this presentation will be also given by Mark. Mark, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, we still have 2 presentations to do, and the coffee break is actually between 11 and 11:30. So I'll try to be extremely fast on this one, at least also to give time to the last speaker. Yes, so this was, I'll do my best really to do it in a very short time. So this was another project that similar to the previous one, but focusing on fresh waters. And these projects address 3 drivers of changes: pollutions, climate change, and land use changes. Let me see if I don't manage to change. Oh, okay, now. So I skipped, of course, those that I need to acknowledge. Just a second. Here it is. I have a problem changing the slides. Yeah. As you know, I would like to show this slide because it's quite interesting. As you know, biodiversity monitoring is a multi-dimensional task, and it has to address different aspects of biodiversity, different ecosystems, habitat species, different drivers of changes, different aspects in terms of biodiversity, ecosystem structure, functions, and composition. So what the project has tried to do, which I like it very much, is to model the complexity of the biodiversity monitoring through a sort of multi-dimensional cube that you have on one axis the ecosystem types organized by the realms. On the second axis, the drivers of biodiversity loss, and on the third axis, the key biodiversity variables which can be affected by the drivers of change, like the EBVs, or also the services the ecosystems are providing. So you could see the cells in the cube, or the group of cells in the cube, correspond to different combinations of ecosystem type, the drivers, and biodiversity variables. It's a way also to see what we actually, because you need to be very often focused with your analysis. And it's also a way to do a gap analysis of what we have and not addressed in terms of impact of the drivers. So this project has done 3 pilots. One is a study on the impact of water pollution, like eutrophications, on freshwater habitats. And for this, they integrated Earth observations in a biogeochemical model similar to what I showed before. But this one is on water ecosystems, and that's the Delft 3D model from Deltares. The second one in the middle is the impact on the climate change through the integrations of the lake surface water temperature from Earth observations into species heat tolerance model to predict the freshwater species physiological tolerance to water temperature. And the last one is a pilot on the impact of land use changes. It's especially how dams are impacting river connectivity and also the sediment transport in the downstream part of the rivers. So I'm trying to go fast. So this was the first pilot on the pollution. So the main innovation of this pilot was it was very similar to what I showed before, is to change the way the model runs, which currently use air temperature. And what we did is that we took the lake surface water temperature from Earth observations, from satellite observations, and we assimilate this into the Delft 3D models to have a better estimation of primary production. So very similar to what I showed before. And you see here on these maps, on the left, you see the input temperature data, either from inside to data or from Earth observations, and then you see on the right how it was used when forcing the Delft 3D models. It's not easy to be fast when you have so many slides, and so on this, I think probably the best is that I just give you very brief introductions of what we've done, and because I really want to give you the time, and you have the slides, and you can have a look at the slides. So the second pilot that we did was related to climate change, and here we tried to explore the impact of the changes in lake surface water temperatures on the freshwater fish abundance and diversity. And for this, the team developed phylogenetic regression models. This was developed by PBL, which was one of the partners of the projects, to estimate the heat tolerance of the fish species. And this was based, this model, on a lot of published data from field experiments, but they use also sort of phylogenetic blocking cross-validations to calibrate the model. And from this heat tolerance model that they've done, they measure the lake surface water temperature on the lake, and they derive what is called the warming tolerance of the fresh water species, which describe what is the current conditions and how is it close to the terminal limits of the species. Huh? I hope that I've been clear in the description. So here you see an example of a daily estimations of how close a species is to its tolerance limit that you see on the right. And the lower the value, the closer he is to the limit, to his limit tolerance in terms of surface water. Of course, this is only one part of the problem. There are other issues like the availability of oxygens and many other things. But it gives definitely a very important source of information. And you see here on this slide, on the left side of this slide, you saw the warming tolerance in the summer months for different years of the main fish species in the Lake Malaran. And on the right, we show a sort of heat map that shows this warming tolerance averaging the values over the whole lake. And the darker the red is, the more the warming tolerance is close to zero. So the third pilot, so I'm going very fast, is to explore the impact of dams on river fragmentations and water quality. So there were two aspects here. For this, the team developed a connectivity model, which was actually developed by Barbarossa and all in 2020, to estimate the degree of habitat fragmentations across the Mekong River, but it can be deployed in other basins, which was the site used for the pilot. And the graph shows the reduced connectivity from different dam constructions that have been done over the years in the area of the Mekong River. And as you know, I mean, the dams are blocking the river channels, so the fish migrates much less. And this threatens a lot the fish species, but it also put the fishery at risk for the downstream communities. Huh? And this second, there was a second product in this pilot, which was to look at the sedimentation in the downstream part of the river. And for this, we use a very simple index, which is the watercolor index. And you see in the heat map on the left how the watercolor is changing before and after the dam construction. So you see even better on the right. So of course, the river flows from left to right. And you see that the sedimentation was much higher before the dam than after the dam. What the project is currently doing is assessing the lack of sedimentation in the downstream rivers on the biodiversity. And I stop here, and I will not take any questions, because I really want to give you time for your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And yes, sorry, I apologize for everyone. We've done a terrible job in keeping time. But our next speaker got it all. You've got climate, land use, future scenario, and he's coming from the Institute of Zoology, Zoological Society of London. Robin, the floor is yours.
I'm aware I stand in between you and coffee, so I'll try and go fast. Bear with me. So I run a relatively small research unit at the Zoological Society of London. We were established in 2006 to provide evidence towards the 2010-2020 biodiversity targets. We collate things like the National Red List database. We produce a lot of Red List assessments, but we also collate and produce the Living Planet Index. I'm not going to describe this much just now, apart from the fact it shows a 69% decline in relative abundance between 1970 and 2018, but I'm happy to discuss this with anyone, warts and all, afterwards. What I want to focus on today is how we've used the underlying data from this to explore how populations are responding to drivers like land use and climate. So the data behind the Living Planet Index is effectively mobilized from the scientific literature by us. We have some large data sets like the BBS data or the European bird data, but we source the data from scientific publications and digitize the graphs in those publications manually to build up a database that now has about 32,000 population time series from about 5,200 species. And that's the work of two very important people, which are Louise and Valentina Steff, three, but that's taken about 15 years to get to this data. we've not yet found a slowdown in the amount of data we can find, and so one of the things we're doing is exploring new methods to extract these data. The data is freely available on our website. There is a data use agreement, but it basically says don't use it for commercial purposes, and please get in touch if you want to use it, because there's some things it's useful to know about the data. We've got data for most countries, but for many of those, it's quite a small amount of data, but there's also an app where you can explore that, so have a look. And there's an R package for constructing trends like the LPI from those data. There's also a paper there by Sophie, where she explores the kind of last 25 years of the data in the LPI. What I want to talk about today, so we made this graph back in 2018 when we did the Bending the Curve paper to talk about the fact that even though we've established these biodiversity targets, we've consistently failed to meet them, and that was true in 2020 as well. And despite having come up with a new framework, it's likely that unless we do something different, we're going to fail to meet those targets too. And so I would argue, and I think Andy Purvis is arguing in another session, that what we need to do is more than just monitor the demise of our planet. We need to do something about predicting what could happen under different scenarios and act on it. And I think that models of how biodiversity responds to climate and land use can help us do that. Our first attempt to do this, we looked at how populations of terrestrial birds and mammals responded to climate and land use. And here we were focused on the rate of anthropogenic land use and the rate of warming. And kind of surprisingly here, we found that actually the rate of warming was the best explanation for decline in bird populations. Despite the fact that, as the previous speaker talked about, we see that anthropogenic land use change or habitat loss is the most frequently reported threat. Actually, in this case, the most significant impacting threat for those birds was climate. But because we had this statistical model, when the Bending the Curve initiative led by David Leclerc at EASA came about, we were able to apply our model on top of those future land use changes for the socioeconomic pathways to explore what things like the LPI would do under different future trends. And the conclusion of that work, of which we were a very small part, was that only in situations where we see rapid changes in how we produce, consume, and conserve the natural environment will we see the trends begin to recover to where we were in 2010. Now, the model we put into that was very simple. It was our early attempts to do that. We've begun to do more complicated things now, and in particular, what I want to focus on today is ecological lags. So what we did here is we took about 1,700 populations from 700 species in the LPI. Those are terrestrial birds and mammals. They are populations for which we know precisely where they are. And each of those populations, we extracted land use change from LEH2 and climate change from the IPSL data, but we explored whether the coincident data or the historically lagged data was a better explanation of what we were observing. So rather than just measuring climate and land use over the population time series, we moved that window backwards in time, which you can see on the right-hand side. And we explored all the different models of different lags. And what we found is that historical lags are better at explaining the current trends in biodiversity, particularly for larger animals. So on the right, for larger birds and mammals, those lags are near 40, 50 years. And so that suggests that even if we want to bend the curve now, we're locked in for some animals because of their mechanistic history. And here, that just shows that for different future socioeconomic pathways, for different land use and climate scenarios, for larger animals, we're likely locked in to those trends for 40, 50 years. The conclusion from that isn't let's not do anything, it's that we need to act now for those changes to manifest 40, 50 years from now. But for smaller things, the other thing we discovered in this model is we incorporated in the top left there, as well as climate and land use, drivers like management and utilization, which are important explanations of those trends. And actually, some of those more proximate causes to do with use and management might be more effective ways of bending the curve more quickly. What's interesting again about those models is it allows us to extrapolate them spatially. So rather than just being limited to the places where we have data, we can begin to extrapolate using maps of land use and climate what we think those populations are doing in other parts of their range. And here, for 3 example places for the Amazon, the Arctic, and the Zambezi, what we've done is we've explored what those populations might be doing in places where we have quite poor data. And so we can produce LPI-like trends for those places, even though we don't have data for there. And that's useful because when the GBF was being discussed, many countries were frustrated that they didn't have good population trend data to estimate abundance trends. So places like Canada, we've got about 50% of vertebrate species we've got good data for, but in places like Africa, we've got quite poor data. But what we can do is we can use our predictive models to make predictions about what's happening there in the absence of data, and then ask those countries to collect better data to reinforce what we're observing. One of the things we're worried about, though, is that those models aren't great. They're okay, they have good explanatory power, but their predictive power gets worse the further you walk away from the data. And in particular, in the bottom left, the Living Planet database tends to overestimate the protectiveness of species, the amount of protection on them compared to what we observe in nature. So what we see as we walk away from our data, things get worse. The Living Planet index we project from those data is much worse than we observe. And so what we need to do is to incorporate better data about the places in that, and that's where I think remote sensing data could help. So at the moment, we use anthropogenic land use metrics like 50% anthropogenic land use change, but actually we're throwing away a vast amount of useful information from remotely sensitive data that we could use in these models. So what we'd like to do, we've kind of not really done this in anger yet, but is to begin to build up space-time volumes of climate and land use trends over the histories of these populations and explore how we can better use those to explain the population trends we observe. We've tried that, but it's a bit noisy. We'd like to do that better. We'd love to collaborate with people to do that better. And then finally, I've realized I'm being quick, we're also aware that the amount of data we have is quite poor. And one of the main problems we've found is that almost all the data we've gathered is in English, because it's from the scientific literature. So we've begun to explore how we can use other languages to flesh out those data. As an example, over the last couple of years, we've looked in Brazilian journals in Portuguese and uncovered a vast amount more data than we had discovered in the international journals in English. And we're doing this for a few different languages now. And if there are people who are interested in collaborating and helping us find data in those countries, please reach out. We'd love to get better data for those places. Finally, there was a talk yesterday about attributing change. When we've explored whether we can detect whether a conservation intervention has occurred in the LPI, we think that even with quite small numbers of populations, we can accurately detect when changes in those abundance occur and when they occur and what that, how good that is. And so it'd be good to discuss that with anyone who is in that session. I will stop there. I mean, that was incredibly fast. Sorry. Any questions?